If you still believe that business works the way it worked before 2019, you are not unlucky. You are in denial. The market is already sending a death certificate. Not with drama, with silence, with metrics that keep getting worse while your brain keeps insisting that effort is enough. In 2026, you don't need motivational speeches. You need clarity so sharp it hurts. Because the truth is, most people don't fail from lack of talent. They fail from refusing to face the real rules they are trapped inside. They keep living inside a fantasy that their store, their offer, their marketing, and their identity are still the center of the universe. The universe is not centered on you, and the economy is not impressed by your optimism. This video is a surgical map of what's coming for Vietnam's retail market and the hidden self underneath every common business habit that looks normal until the bill arrives. We're going to talk about online platforms becoming battlefields, offline empires collapsing quietly, the legal and financial purge that kills the informal economy, and the branding trap that turns expensive visuals into a faster death. And then we'll end with what actually keeps companies alive when everyone else is already buried under their own bad decisions. Here's why this matters to you personally, even if you're not running a huge company. If you're a founder, a manager, a seller, a marketer, a buyer, a freelancer connected to retail, you are not separate from this. You are part of the supply chain of consequences. When profit margins collapse, when cash flow dries up, when platforms change the attention economy, everyone downstream feels it. Your team feels it. Your family feels it. Your self-respect feels it. And you start bargaining with reality, like reality is the one being unreasonable. Let's begin with the first uncomfortable truth. The online era of anyone can win is over. It never stopped being competition. It stopped being easy competition. For a decade, e-commerce looked like a shortcut. People saw the surface story. Download an app, open a shop, post content, order cheap stock, run ads, receive orders like rain. The hidden story was never shown. The platforms were still building their ecosystems, subsidizing growth, rewarding new merchants, and letting low-quality sellers survive long enough to fill warehouses and advertising dashboards. But when entry barriers collapse, the market fills up with identical dreams. Suddenly, every shop is selling the same thing to the same people, using the same tactics, at the same time with the same hope. And hope is not a strategy. Now you are standing in the middle of a platform war for attention. TikTok Shop didn't just create a new sales channel, it changed the psychological contract between buyers and sellers. Before, shoppers went to Shopee with a search intent. They already knew what they wanted. The platform was closer to a catalog. Now people buy because emotion hits first. A short video triggers immediate desire. 15 seconds becomes a battlefield for dopamine. The customer is not shopping for information. The customer is shopping for a feeling, curiosity, impulse, relief, status, belonging. That means you don't just sell products anymore. You sell your ability to create mental urgency. And this is where the hidden self makes its move. Many shop owners don't admit the truth that they are not content creators. They pretend their job is still import and export. They think posting an image is marketing. They behave like the old world still exists under the new algorithm. Then they wonder why their costs explode while conversions shrink. The second truth is brutally structural. Online sellers are now paying a combined tax on every single transaction. People call it fees, advertising, shipping, operations. But psychologically, it becomes something else. It becomes dependence. It becomes slavery to the platform's pricing model. Let's talk numbers in a way your brain can't dodge. Many merchants face something like 30 to 40% total operational variation cost plus advertising costs per order. That doesn't mean every merchant spends exactly that. It means that when you stack the costs, they stop being small percentages. They become a wall. Imagine you buy a product for 100,000 Vietnamese dong and you sell it for 200,000. Your gross margin sounds like 50%. You can already feel your confidence swelling. You tell yourself, I can scale this. The margin is healthy. Then reality speaks in line items. First, you pay platform fees, listing fees, service charges, payment fees, extra charges tied to the platform ecosystem. Sometimes free shipping is not free. It is subsidized by someone, and that someone is you. This alone can eat around 10 to 14% before you even talk about ads. Then the ads arrive like a debt collector with manners. Auction-based advertising is not a neutral system. When more sellers compete, the cost per click rises.
When conversion rates drop, the auction gets even more brutal because the system rewards efficiency, not hope. Ads go from a lever to a trap. Then there's the actual cost nobody brags about.
The hidden costs: returns, damaged goods, packaging, staff dedicated to live sessions, customer service, channel monitoring. Even inventory management failures are costs wearing a costume. And if your stock strategy is sloppy, your margin becomes negative without you noticing until your bank account screams. This is the part most people hide from themselves. They keep trying to solve a structural problem with motivational behavior. They work longer hours. They post more. They run one more campaign. They take personal credit for numbers they do not control. It feels like hustle. It is actually camouflage. You start living like the platform is your employer, and you're just a temporary contractor. You feed the platform and the ad system, not because you love them, but because you're addicted to the illusion that effort will eventually bend the algorithm in your favor. Effort does not bend algorithms. Data and positioning do. Eventually people flee, not because they became stupid, but because they became honest enough to survive. The migration from merchants to affiliates is not a new trend. It is an admission that holding inventory and buying traffic became too expensive for the risk profile of small players. Affiliate marketing becomes attractive because it removes one of the scariest psychological monsters: inventory fear. Merchants don't just fear losing money, they fear being trapped. They fear choked cash flow. They fear warehouse pressure. They fear unsellable items haunting their shelves like guilt. They fear the day someone asks for receipts and the answer is silent. So affiliate becomes a psychological escape route. You stop pretending you are building a retail empire. You become a reviewer, a recommender, an aggregator of trust. You sell influence and credibility, not the physical product. And here's the ugly truth. This affiliate shift creates two outcomes. One, it intensifies polarization. Large distributors with stable logistics and reliable inventory survive and eat risk. They are strong enough to carry goods, pay for storage efficiently, and absorb demand fluctuations. Two, it eliminates the middle who can't create attention. If you only import and resell, and you cannot compete with content, you cannot compete with price because price competition is a race to suicidal floors. You also cannot compete with distribution because you don't have logistics dominance. So you get squeezed from both sides. This is the new Darwinism in retail, not the dramatic kind in movies, the quiet kind where the numbers just stop flattering you. Now let's move to the next front, the offline empire that collapsed without needing a viral scandal. Online battles are loud. They create posts, they create arguments, they create who is better content. But offline collapse is silent and slow enough to make people believe they still have time. That's the most dangerous type of failure, the failure that looks like normal business until the day it doesn't. Small shops in Vietnamese urban markets have been held together for over 30 years by familiar habits. The owner sits behind the counter, fans themselves with patience, writes debt in a notebook, and relies on relationships. It's not just a business model, it's a social structure. Then chains and modern convenience formats arrive like weather. They don't need to convince you emotionally at first. They just offer a faster experience. Air conditioning, cleaner spaces, modern payment, staff training, familiar product variety, a sense of safety. And consumers, especially younger ones, are willing to pay extra for convenience and calm. They are tired of uncertainty. They want speed. They want reliability. They want to stop thinking. But that's not even the main killer. The main killer is data. Chains don't guess like humans guess. They measure demand patterns, track inventory with systems, and reorder using forecasts. They can tell which neighborhood buys what. They know which category peaks during certain times. They can run promotions without chaos because their data tells them what will actually move. A traditional store can still try to remember what usually sells, but memory is not a system. Memory cannot handle millions of micro signals. It becomes instinct, and instinct is expensive when demand shifts quickly. So offline players are not losing because they are lazy. They are losing because their operating logic is obsolete. Now we bring in the third truth, the real estate nightmare. In 2026, commercial leases become a trap disguised as a strategy. Picture this: prime street stores with old branding and stubborn landlords. Month after month, the lease sign goes up and nobody takes the deal. Vacancy stays high.
Even when rent drops, tenants still don't enter. Why? Because the buyer behavior that made these locations profitable has changed. The old model depended on random foot traffic. You opened a shop hoping people would walk by and get curious. You paid rent like marketing. Rent was an advertisement carved into the city landscape. Now customers don't browse streets for discovery. They discover online. They check TikTok reviews. They follow live stream recommendations. They search on Google Maps before they even walk out the door. So a store on a golden street becomes a costly museum piece.
It looks valuable to the landlord, but it is economically useless to a tenant who cannot monetize randomness. And then the fourth truth lands. Branding is not salvation. Empty branding can kill you faster. When businesses feel pressure, they reach for the easiest myth. Let's build a brand. It sounds smart. It sounds modern. It sounds like the solution that separates entrepreneurs from amateurs. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Branding is only meaningful if it increases what you can charge. Branding exists to raise your price without forcing your customer to feel robbed. That means branding is a tool that protects margin by protecting demand. However, many companies treat branding like decoration. They pay for flashy videos, influencers, brand ambassadors, cinematic campaigns, and pop-up events while the product quality inside the box is weak. This is where the hidden self is exposed. Inside, the business owner knows something is wrong. They don't want to admit that the product doesn't win, so they replace substance with aesthetics. They bet on image because they cannot win on performance. That bet might work briefly because people do try things. They get curious. But in the age of transparent information, curiosity turns into evidence. If the product fails, the disappointment doesn't stay private. It becomes content. It becomes a review. It becomes a public story. One angry customer can generate a cascade. Social platforms magnify failure like a speaker amplifies a microphone. A weak product under empty branding is not just a slow death, it becomes a fast execution. The market is not naive anymore. It is smart and ruthless. Customers can lift you in one night, and they can bury you in one click. So the survival formula is not branding bigger than product. It is product strong enough to withstand the marketing wave. Then emotional branding layered on top. Then real customer care to keep trust from evaporating. Think of it like a musical instrument. Branding is the speaker volume. It makes your song louder. But if your voice is out of tune, making it louder only tells the world you sing badly faster. Now let's step into the final, most brutal arena, legal and financial purge. This is where fantasies go to die. Many small businesses grew rich through advantages that were never fully legitimate. Avoiding taxes, doing under-the-table sales, using personal transfers, importing through informal channels, selling without proper invoices. This isn't a moral lecture. It's an economic mechanism. Informality lowers costs artificially, allowing cheap pricing that seems like a competitive edge. People can sell low because their internal cost structure is hidden. But in 2026, the hidden economy gets exposed, not slowly, not through polite warnings, through systems, data integration, and enforcement built on technology. When taxation systems become more intelligent, enforcement becomes less dependent on physical raids and more dependent on algorithmic detection of money flows and transaction records. If platforms, payment trails, and identity verification data get synced, the proof is not something a tax officer needs to hunt down in the dark. The system already knows. It just needs to confirm. This becomes a psychological shock for many owners because their business identity was built on a certain kind of invisibility. They may feel like they were playing the game well, but suddenly the rules become explicit. And when the rules become explicit, the profit structure that relied on invisibility collapses. When small households are forced to transition into formal business models, the accounting requirements change everything. Invoices for input purchases become mandatory, which means you cannot buy from floating supply at cheap prices without receipts. You need legal documentation, and documented supply often costs more. Invoices for output sales become mandatory. That changes how revenue is recorded and reported. It also increases transparency the owner can no longer control. You must register employees and pay social insurance. You must handle corporate income taxes. And this is where the hidden self breaks. People used to experience profit that feels real but is actually fake. When the tax loophole disappears, that profit becomes loss. Not because they suddenly lost skills, because the cost structure becomes honest. So in 2026, accountants, auditors, and financial consultants gain power, not as bureaucrats,
As survival managers, a CFO or a head accountant who can optimize taxes legally becomes priceless because they protect the business from collapsing under huge tax bills. And this is important for you to understand. This isn't punishment, it's market cleansing. Unstable structures get eliminated. Healthy structures survive and expand into the vacuum. Now, you feel fear while hearing this. Don't panic. Fear is not always weakness. Sometimes fear is your mind finally recognizing an approaching reality it kept ignoring. The point is not to frighten you. The point is to trigger your survival instincts, because between desert and hope, there are cacti that still bloom, but only if they've stored water, only if they prepared in advance. So let's talk about what staying alive actually requires, not vague advice.
Actionable strategic thinking that matches the new world. First, think product, not catalog. Stop trying to sell everything to everyone. The hidden self loves quantity because quantity feels safe. You feel like if you have many options, you can satisfy more people. But in an environment where costs are heavy and attention is expensive, having too many products becomes a dilution problem. It makes your operation messy, your inventory spread, your data unreliable, and your marketing unfocused. In 2026, you need focus so hard it looks uncomfortable. Shrink your product range. Choose a few core SKUs and commit to them completely, not half-heartedly, not with "we'll test later," with discipline. And the core SKUs must have real competitive advantages, not just reduced features to cut costs, not just cheap quality. Real advantage means your product solves a pain better, lasts longer, performs reliably, and creates satisfaction that prevents return rates from destroying your margin. Branding is not magic. Branding is a megaphone. It amplifies the product voice. A megaphone cannot fix a bad performance. It can only make the failure louder. Second, standardize your finance and tax now. Pay the cost of compliance before compliance comes to collect with interest. This is painful because it forces you to separate personal money and business money. It forces you to clean your ledger. It forces you to check invoices and documentation from the beginning. It forces you to rethink your procurement. Do not wait. Waiting feels like hope because you're postponing the pain. But postponing doesn't remove the problem. It just increases the damage if you are exposed later. Hire professional tax and accounting support, not as a luxury, as a shield. When you manage your books properly, compliance becomes an insurance premium. It buys stability. If you built your business on shortcuts, the market will eventually throw you out.